Hello and welcome to all who have joined me. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Claudz Thornton, better known as Claudz, aka Miss Ouch. And I'm a radio presenter and interviewer here at iLive Radio. I would normally be focused on independent music and artists, something really close to my heart. However, right now, with what's going on in our communities, I'm finding it increasingly difficult to simply use this platform to play music without addressing the issues clearly becoming an epidemic for us here in the UK. And as such, I wanted to invite a very special and highly respected guest into the studio today, someone who is extremely knowledgeable about things both at grassroots level and what's going on in Parliament. She goes by the name of Donna Murray-Turner. Donna, welcome to the studios. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you for coming. I know how busy you are. It's taken a little while to pin you down because I know you've been going from radio station to radio station, TV and what have you. We'll go into a bit more detail a bit later, but I thank you for carving time out of your busy schedule to, share your knowledge with those who've tuned in to us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. I'd like to thank management, both Jason Henry and Jarzino Morris for backing this initiative, okay? Now I'm just going to state a few facts as to why we're here today. Knife crime related offences rose by 8% in England and Wales in the past year, and that's the government figures that have shown that. Between April 2018 and March 2019, police forces recorded 43,516 offences involving a knife or a sharp instrument. And that's in comparison with 40,215 in the year ending March 2018. So we're not talking about deaths, but we are talking about incidences across the UK and in Wales involving a sharp instrument or a knife. And that's awful. We can't allow this to become the norm, all right? In recent weeks, the government has come under increased scrutiny over their tackling of Britain's knife crime crisis. And as such, controversial stop and search powers have been implemented, and this source is from The Guardian. So, Donna, there's a very specific and obvious reason why you have been specifically invited to speak with us today. Now, I've met you, Donna, a few times, and we share some common interests, okay? And we have spoken on a few debates affecting our community, courtesy of another radio station, which will remain nameless at the moment. And as such, I have been following your movements, as I could tell that you're an individual who runs quite deep in anything that you utter. All right? So whatever we've talked about, whatever the discussion's been, I've found you to have so much depth and knowledge, and the way that you articulate yourself, I'm amazed by it. And as such, I've been following you, all right? Now, in following you, I've seen you put out podcasts, if you want to call it that. You've done videos, and most of them have gone viral, all right? And people are commenting, and they're applauding you for what you're doing, all right? We'll go into the detail a bit later. So would you be kind enough, Donna, to tell us a little bit more about the other roles and positions that you currently hold?
Okay, so thank you for that introduction. I'm the chair of the Safer Neighbourhoods Board for the London Borough of Croydon, as you've already said. And that role is, although it's community-led and driven, it's quite an important role, or I take it to be quite an important role. It's about overseeing and kind of raising the interests and concerns of community members across the borough. Yeah. So not just the ones that might be raised in the locality to which I live, and I have a particular interest across the borough, because all of their concerns are important.
Of course.
I'm also a member of a forum called the Criminal Justice Alliance.
Wow.
And that has organisations such as Liberty, and several other well-known organisations that kind of inform policy to Home Office and government. And last year, my organisation, Another Night of Sisterhood, was proudly mentioned in their report to government, which was really brilliant. Just, you know, a simple mention about our consistency in community engagement. Can
I just ask you a question about that? Because you're actually the director of ANOS, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Could you explain what ANOS stands for? ANOS. What does it stand for?
So it stands for Another Night of Sisterhood.
Right.
And I called it Another Night of Sisterhood because as a black woman, I didn't feel it was my place to kind of preach to or speak to my brothers.
Right.
I don't have experience of being a black man, and the reason behind Another Night of Sisterhood was about bringing more of an awareness,
right,
and bringing more of an informal education to predominantly sisters, because in my sort of peer circle and experience and where I live, the majority of my friends are heads of their own households.
Okay.
So it wasn't we don't exclude men at all, and it's not about sisters doing it for themselves. We have a lot of men that come and join our forum, but I didn't think it was my place to kind of speak for or on behalf of my brothers, and that's why it's called Another Night of Sisterhood.
But it's a support mechanism from women who are, you know, bringing up children on their own, or
100%,
you know, need advice, need sort of a community support in maybe raising their children, need advice. So
it is advice, it's support, it's education. It's kind of, when I first started, there was nothing like ANOS, and that's what we call it by its abbreviation, ANOS.
Yeah.
There was nothing I could see that was like ANOS. Definitely in the Croydon area, there was nowhere for adults to go and speak with other adults who have similar experiences. There was no peer learning. It was all very tick box. There was nothing that spoke to the real community engagement that I know and kind of come from. So I wanted to create something that was similar to what I knew and what I was, you know, comfortable with. And like I said, in April 2016, we had our first ever meeting. We had 95 women in the room.
Oh, wow.
Standing room only. And I asked them then and there, if I did this every month, would you come? And they haven't let me down.
Wow.
Every month it's almost a different audience type, but every month ANOS is kept, and every month the people come. So, you know,
they're obviously getting something from it.
Yes.
And spreading the word.
Yes. And sometimes we, you know, it's not all nicey. Sometimes we really get down to some nitty-gritty subjects, but that's what the community needs. It needs a safe space where it feels safe, and that takes time to build trust,
of course,
and those kind of confidential relationships. So we tend to say at ANOS, what is said there stays there, because it's a safe space for people to be able to share and say how they really feel and what it is they really want and need for their families, for themselves, to be the best version of themselves, to be honest. And if we don't create more of those spaces, then we're not allowing people to really share their voice and share their truth, more importantly. So for me, ANOS has been a big part of where I am now, taking that foundation of hearing the community's voice and channeling that up to the various forums.
Because at the end of the day, I think what you're saying here as well, because obviously our focus is the youth and what's going on, we'll go into that in a moment. If a high percentage of women who you say are like you, for example, you've put it across better than I have, but if they're the head of the household in so many cases, they can't give what they don't have. So you're providing support for them to build themselves up in order that they can impart that to their offspring.
That's right. Yeah,
Brilliant.
Definitely.
So I'm going to just pull it in a little bit just to say the purpose of the interview. Okay. We here at iLive would like to provide a consistent long-term platform to support you and what you're doing, because we believe that you need focused support and you need ongoing support in what you're doing. Because I have watched a number of your videos and I know that you've said, don't just press like, because no one is here today doing anything for likes. We could twerk and get more likes, or certain amount of likes.
You could, not mine.
No, I wouldn't go there, but what I'm saying to you is we're not doing anything for likes.
No.
At the end of the day, you're selflessly giving your time, your energy, and doing research and imparting information, off your own accord. And so what we would like to do is support you in what you're doing to help to spread the word. Now, you want to help to provide ongoing information to parents to better understand the potential issues facing our youth and how to support and guide their children. Also to help keep parents and children abreast of legislation policy changes affecting our communities in a timely way. All right. So can you take us to the beginning and tell us how and why the type of work that you do came about?
I just shared a little bit about the reason. But for me, I think on a personal level, and I'll share that with you, there was something about my father dying and my sister 4 months later dying. And then by the end of that year, my mother was diagnosed terminal with cancer also. And there was something about the reality of being catapulted from eldest child to suddenly head of this family.
I see.
Responsible for so much, despite my grief.
Okay.
I also have 3 children of my own. Yeah. I have my partner. And at the time I was at university. And there was something about that whole experience in kind of going through it that I realised and had to draw on a lot of my own foundation.
Okay.
In terms of the input from my parents, that strength, that resilience. Because a lot of what we, and this is one of the things that we talk about at ANOS, resilience and sort of better understanding, to love yourself, to respect yourself, these things are learnt. We're not born respecting ourselves. We're not born being resilient. In fact, a newborn child is quite selfish. It only knows about its own needs.
Of course.
So all of these things are things that are learnt. Now, our first educators are our parents, or the people that become our primary, instructors. Yes. And so if you're not taught these things in times of crisis or when you need them most, they're not there for you to draw on. And so it was just that whole kind of piece of reflection where I had, I might have seemed like I had it all together, but there were times when I thought I was losing it. And it just kind of made me think about my parents' contribution. So I'll just tell you briefly. So my parents were Jehovah's Witnesses, and that in itself is a whole comedy sketch. But however, what they did both accomplish, my mother for 30 years ran a ladies' organisation, because she found out in her church that it wasn't just the married women, it was some of the older single women who were forever being told from the pulpit, you shouldn't have bad association, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. But there was no creation of something that they could do and that they could do together. And so she created her own ladies' club, and that ran for 30 years until the day of her death. And my father, I remember that they're in our congregation, as they call them, there were a lot of older West Indian gentlemen who weren't illiterate, but weren't completely able to read and write for themselves. And these are men that were older than my father. They had their own homes. They had bought their own homes. So these aren't people that were without capabilities. But they were often complaining that they weren't getting ahead in terms of the religion, and they felt that their lack of or inability to read as everybody else was holding them back. And I remember my father started a little school. He went out and he bought some books, and in the upstairs kitchen of my grandmother's house on a Sunday evening, he would go and he would help these particular brothers to enhance their capabilities. So for me, all of that combined, I just decided if I was going to survive, I had to do something for my community. It's as simple as that. And my community, it's not just the people that live under my roof. I have a large family. I have a huge friendship group. And I just decided if I was going to survive, then I had to do this. It was something that I had to do. And looking around, at that time in Croydon, it was part of the knife crime spike, 2016, 2017. It was almost every week. But yet there was nowhere that statutory provision had provided for parents to talk. There was nowhere to have these conversations. And I know as a parent, and having a lot of friends whose children were involved sometimes on the fringes of this kind of activity, that it's a place full of judgment.
Yeah.
You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If you're a single mum, it's all your fault. You're not with the dad. You don't bring up the children right, you know. And then again, if you don't work, you don't eat. But if you are a recipient of benefits, then you're lazy. You know, there's just no right way to do it.
Yeah.
And as you and I know, and every other parent out there, when we have these children, we come home from the hospital, nobody slips you a handbook and says, Claudette, this is what you follow now for the next 25 years. So all of that combined made me feel that we could do this together. And I have to say that although I'm the director of ANOS, it's been a massive learning curve.
So you're learning as well?
Massive. Things as simple as domestic abuse. There's been so many things I have learned about and so many personalities that have worked with ANOS that have impacted my life that they may never know.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
And it's all part of the journey. So that's a bit of context about where I've come from.
Interesting. Okay, so you've worked for Croydon doing a number of things and tasks that both the community, the media and authorities have keenly noted. All right. Would you like to elaborate on that for me? What have you been doing and why do you think people are listening to you?
I think people have taken an interest because I speak to the heart of the matter, and whatever my gift is, it is the ability to articulate both at the grassroots level and also at the corporate level. Yeah. So I have worked with my local police force in delivering unconscious bias training to officers, so that's sergeants and PCs.
What do you mean by unconscious bias?
Well, my take on it is this: if there's going to be an increase, and I know we'll get to that later.
That's right.
But I know there's going to be an increase in stop and search. Yes. Stop and search is one of the most divisive topics in our community, the BME community. With in London, a black boy being stopped 4 times as much as a white counterpart, and outside of London, 8 times as much.
I understand.
So for me, I can't change legislation.
No.
But what I can do where I live is influence the way that legislation is implemented. So I took it upon myself. I also have 2 sons.
Yes.
I took it upon myself to approach the local Metropolitan Police Service for Croydon and say, listen, as a community leader, why don't we put on some workshops for parents, for young people, so that if stop and search has to go ahead, at least they are informed rather than being picked on and preyed on for their lack of education, their lack of knowledge, and then it all going south from there.
Of course.
It was very successful. The first one, we had about 30, 40 parents. It was in the holidays as well. It was in August. I'll never forget. And I always encourage parents to bring their children
with them.
So many times we leave children out of it, and they are the ones who need to learn.
They're the ones living it.
They're the ones that are living it. You understand? So that's one of the things I did. And also I did some work with the BBC.
Yes.
Because of the stop and search, they came down, they'd heard about me. The local MPS said, well, we've got a community leader in the north of the borough. This is what she does. They interviewed me. And they were asking me what I thought I could do to kind of work against the tide of knife crime at the time. And I said we need an increase in community engagement. Now, community engagement is just, it basically means to talk.
Yeah.
If we do not talk to people, if you do not talk to me, Claudz, I do not know how you are feeling.
Of course.
If you do not talk to me, you do not know how I'm feeling. So this lack of dialogue that we seem to have, especially in our community, and I say especially because I remember a time when we had nothing but talk. When we talked more, we did more things together. It was so important to create a space where that could happen. And I would say, even though many of my colleagues back in Croydon would probably say not, I believe that having those safe spaces took a lot of tension off of some of the subjects that could have been quite divisive. We may never agree, but if I hear your point of view and you hear mine, that may go some way to
better understanding
each other. So I think that's one of the reasons that I've caught some people's attention.
Okay, clearly it seems that many people think that you're indeed someone whose voice needs to be heard and whose strategy needs to be rolled out. Now, I don't know the exact figures for Croydon, but I am aware that you had a consistent drop in knife crime or violent crime in Croydon.
Yeah.
Now, Croydon happens to be the largest borough in London.
That's right.
It also has the largest black and ethnic mix.
That's right.
So in theory, really, if the rhetoric was right, then really Croydon should have the highest rate. Is that right?
Yeah.
And it's quite the opposite. So does that summarise? Well, not summarise. Does that go forward to one of the main reasons why people are interested in what you've done in that borough?
I think so. I think even though, and listen, I'm in no way going to fantasize and say, well, the whole of Croydon comes to Anos. It does not.
No.
But just the fact that, counsellors know there's somewhere that they can signpost parents to and families. I've got gangs workers who work for the YOS who Don, is Anos on this, right?
What's YOS,
So it's a youth offending team.
Okay.
Gangs workers will ring me up. Don, I've got a couple of parents. Can I send them down to Anos? Can they phone you? So I get a lot of referrals from statutory who know and are well aware that they have no like for like in terms of their own provision to help parents to the extent that Anos does.
Okay, so Donna, the main targeted points that you wanted to raise on this forum today were, number one, to share an urgent notice to both parents and children about the changes to stop and search laws and the reasons why this has been recently implemented.
That's right. And I'm sure a lot of parents might have seen the WhatsApp message from Lee Jasper, which said much better than I could ever what's going on. But just to kind of relay it live to parents.
Yes.
With the increase, so we know that Boris Johnson is now the unelected Prime Minister of the country. And with his focus being on increasing stop and search, decreasing the level of power within the Metropolitan Police Service that needs to apply for stop and search. So before it was not superintendent, it was chief inspector level.
Right.
Now it's back down to inspector level,
right.
which is one of the things that the Macpherson report highlighted was wrong in terms of the institutionalised racism within the Metropolitan Police Service.
Remember that? But
we've gone full circle and we've gone back to it being at the behest of an inspector level member of staff, that is Section 60. Now, Section 60 is, let me just give a little explanation. Section 60 is a bit different than your average on-the-road stop and search. Section 60 is meant to be intelligence-informed stop and search about an area or a domicile, a particular home or a particular road.
I see.
And that's normally based on the amount of activity that police either see or are led to believe is going on in a certain area or a certain address.
Okay.
With that then, a Section 60 can be applied for. And what that does is, for a certain amount of hours, that gives officers the right to stop and search anybody within that area or at that address without needing to give an explanation for why the stop and search is going ahead. So it's very important for parents to understand that. There is no... the officers are under no obligation to provide reasons for which, because it's normally intelligence led.
I hear you.
With that being the case, for somebody like myself, it makes more sense to let parents know, because we're now 1 week into the 6 weeks holidays. We've got a lot of our young people that are going to be out and about. There's no school, there's no college, and so they're going to be going about.
Parents are at work.
A lot of parents are at work. A lot of parents are at work. Everybody can fly their kids out. Yeah. So the children are going to be around on their way to and from activities with friends, with family members. And it's really important that they understand that it's important for them to know what's behind a Section 60. And there is going to be an increase in the amount of these intelligence-led road, address, area-wide stops and searches. So if your child is traversing through one of those areas at a time, it's important that parents are equipped to know what their child might need to do. Now, recently I was dragged over the coals on the Eddie Nestor show, Drive Home show on BBC Radio London, but I still stand by what I said even then.
Yeah.
I know that there are Metropolitan Police officers who are antagonistic I have seen it firsthand. I've witnessed many stops and searches in my own local borough. What I'm asking parents to do is to speak to the young people and talk to them about how they address officers, how you speak to officers. What people who normally antagonize others into or goading them into a certain course of action, what they want is a reaction.
Of course.
And sometimes they want the worst reaction from you, so then that can then justify their next course of action.
Yes.
And I would say, hold your own, be respectful, speak clearly. So we don't need any fam, blood, bruv, no.
Yes.
Speak clearly, level up is what I would say. Maintain eye contact.
Yes.
Let them know that you're a young man, a young woman within your own right, and that you are experienced enough to hold and articulate your own conversation. Always ask for justification for why you've been stopped. Always ask for go wisely. And at another time, I'll go into that more at greater depth.
Yeah.
That's what every police officer should give young people when it's just a general stop and search.
Yes.
It's an acronym for some, some pointers that they should give, the reasons why they're being stopped, so on and so forth.
But can I just stop you there? You just said that if they're issuing something 60, what was it?
Section 60.
Section 60, that they were not under no obligation to share that information with you. But where you just said that they can answer, they may not be answered. Is that right?
That's true. They may, but then they should say this: you're being stopped in accordance with Section 60, blah blah blah. So the young person would know.
Right.
Okay. So it's important for parents and for young people to know the difference.
Right.
There is your regular stop and search.
Yes.
And there is a Section 60 stop and search. Section 60, quite different. They're under no obligation to give you any information whatsoever, but the same rules apply. Articulate yourself clearly. Articulate yourself to to a reasonable level. Also, hold eye contact.
Yes.
If they raise their voice, you can simply say respectfully, sir, you're raising your voice, I'm not raising mine. I wish to make my points. Level up. It's time to it's not about showing them. No. It's about articulating your needs in regards to this piece of legislation so that you can walk free.
It's also not about impressing your friends, because I think a lot of peer pressure dictates how some of these young people may behave. If they're being stopped in front of people that they have to show that they're tough or whatever, that they may play up and they think that they're winning, but actually they're losing because they may be getting all the props from their friends, but in actual fact it could lead to an arrest. Am I right?
No, you're quite right.
Okay.
And playing up for your friends, we all know, is just not the best course of action.
No.
I mean, that's easy for us to say because we're older and we've been
Of
through that. I
course.
played up for my friends.
Of course, we've all done it.
We've all done it, but it is about parents having that serious conversation with them.
And knowing when that can work and when it's just really going nowhere.
And that's about emotional maturity.
Of course.
And having those conversations with our young people, knowing if our children are at that emotional stage where they can deal with that level of confrontation and that they can come out of it the other side safely. I think that's really important with this holiday period in front of us. And with the increase, my focus is again bringing back out my stop and search community engagement meetings where parents can ask ranking officers up front the questions that they want to know, what is legal, what is not, and also for the young people to also be informed. You don't have to take off your hat if you're told to do so. You don't have to take off your shoes.
Right.
You're supposed to be taken somewhere else for those particular searches to go ahead. So if your child is on the roadside and that's what's being asked of them, that's not a legal stop and search. These are things that parents need to know. Parents also need to know that metropolitan-wide, young people are no longer given a slip. They used to be given a slip automatically, which would have the officer's details on, the details of the stop and search, so that you could give it to mum and dad to say, I was late because of this and that. That no longer exists.
Oh, wow.
So what the young people need to do is take shoulder numbers or request a slip. Say, please, officer so-and-so, I would like a slip as proof to, I don't know if they're on the way to wherever, but definitely parents should know that that's no longer an automatic right, which, and I also want to say this, with the new structure of the Metropolitan Service in terms of tri-boroughs, so like my own borough, Croydon, we're now assisted with Bromley and Sutton.
Right.
So you've got officers from all over. It's not necessarily Croydon officers that may stop my son.
I see.
There could be officers from Sutton, there can be officers from Bromley.
Right.
So parents also need to be aware of that in trying to trace whoever stopped your child, if it went badly, it's a bit of a task. So it's
Right.
really about educating our young people to ask for shoulder numbers, that you can trace officers, and also
Yeah.
CAD references. CAD references are refreshed every day. So 2, 3,
Can you
4,
explain
5.
what a CAD reference
Okay,
is,
so it's
please?
like a case referral number
I see.
that the Metropolitan Service will give for every case, every
I
stop
understand,
and
so
search.
you can find the detail.
So you can find the details of
Yeah.
the stop and search or the case or whatever it
Right.
is. Those are refreshed every day.
Okay.
So if I gave you a CAD reference today, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I give it, you take that home to your mum, and she wants to ring up and find why Claudz was stopped. Her saying 2, 3, 4, 5 tomorrow won't mean the same thing. You should know that
the
2, 3,
date as
4,
well.
5 with today's date, the date that the child
understand.
was intercepted, is
Right,
how
that's
you have to
interesting,
refer
yeah.
it. It's these small things that can make all the difference.
You know about recording, something we raised when we were sort of preparing for this meeting, with regards to body cams and with regards to maybe the youth themselves using their phones to record something like a stop and search. And what would you say about that?
They should know, every officer should have their body worn camera on.
And is that compulsory?
It is compulsory.
Right. Okay.
On another Oprah show, we will talk about that, but that is the law. It's safety for
Right.
them as officers,
Yes.
and it's safety for the public.
Right.
Every officer should have their body worn camera on.
Okay, so Donna, we just talked about the fact that it's compulsory for police officers to wear their body cams, all
And for
right?
them to be on.
And then for them to be on, and that, you know, anybody has a right to ask whether that's on, and the police should answer that question. I just wanted to confirm with you, are you aware of how police tend to respond to the general public filming an arrest or a stop and search? How do they tend to respond to that?
This is where it becomes quite divisive, because by and large, it is the black community that has the most or the most audible problem with stop and search, quite
Right.
rightly too,
Right.
because of its historical context. So a lot of the officers, when I'm doing unconscious bias training with them, they do kind of complain that when you get 20 or so people surrounding them whilst they're trying to do a stop and search, you get 20 different voices, 20 different demands, and quite often they find that we tend to feed off of each other's hype.
Right.
So what they've asked consistently for is that in a group such as that somebody self-elects
Right.
and kind of turns to the other community members and said, I'm going to go over and I'm going to ask the police what's going on, and then I will come back and I will feed it to the rest of you, which is ideal. But we know in practice with our community, you know, somebody's going to say, oh, well, you think who you are, I forgot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It can be, but that is something that, and I think that's a very real point, because they're going about their jobs. They're going about their livelihoods. They're trying to be professional. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yes.
But if we're not giving them the space to do that, then sometimes we are enabling the situation to kind of go south. So we need to be mindful that we give them space, that we do self-elect where possible, so that somebody can go and find out what's going on, come back and report to the rest of us. But that shouldn't stop recording. And recording doesn't have, I mean, we've all got new phones. You can zoom in. You don't need to be right up underneath them.
You can do it from a distance.
You can do it from a distance.
Yeah.
It's not going to stop you from missing the
In
salient
other words,
points
be
of the stop.
unobtrusive.
Be unobtrusive.
Yeah.
And obviously have your views and your comments, definitely. But there are ways in which, so, you know, if you live in a locality, there's somebody just like me in your borough, a safer neighbourhoods chair. This is my thing with our community. We're very passionate and we're very outspoken, but we don't always know the best ways to, you know, to get what we want to certain places.
That's right.
And social media is great. But sometimes there are forums where we need to go. We need to go to town hall meetings. We need to go to community meetings. We need to go to community safety meetings. Everybody should know who their cabinet member for community safety is.
Right.
You should know these things so that when there are meetings, this is the whole point of having, you know, like a councillor, a political structure. You lobby. Those people come to you every 4 years for votes.
Yeah.
If they're not doing what you want as a community, then you don't vote for them. It's as simple as that. But until people understand, I suppose, the basic structure and get involved, not just understand it, but get involved, invested in it. This is how you make change, and this is how you have more of a say of what happens to you and happens to your families. And I think that's something that's really resonated with me as a person, and this is why I've made the moves that I have, because I want to be in those spaces when those conversations are being had, and I want to be in those spaces to say, well, no, that's not how it is in the community. Actually, it's this. And it's not just because I say so. I have evidence. I have ANOS as my backup.
Yes.
I have my conversations as my backup with community members. So I'm not talking from a place of non-existence or myth. This is a very real subject. This is how parents feel, and so we have to work to be in those spaces. Otherwise you have no way of challenging some of the most adverse policy that affects us and our children directly.
Absolutely, because we want obviously the violence on the streets of London, Birmingham, Coventry, wherever, to be brought to a minimum or to a stop as far as possible. We can't do it by ourselves any more than the police can do it on their own. So really, I think if I'm right in summarising what you're saying is that we want change. There are people employed to help assist in that process. In doing so, recently, the stop and search has increased. That way, if somebody is carrying something, they're more likely to be caught, which should be seen as a positive thing. If your child is going about their daily business and they don't have a knife or a sharp implement, on them, then they should accept that the process is happening not only to protect others, but to protect the person being stopped as well. And so whoever is stopped should not embrace it. I mean, that's probably be a bit of a heavy word to use in this instance, but they should understand the reasons. They should understand how to behave in those circumstances and allow the police to do their jobs in order that we can bring about positive change. Because if they're likely to be stopped, hopefully they'll leave those knives at home. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very important fact to add as well that most stops and searches go further to no further action. They're NFA'd. Most children, young people that are stopped are not carrying Claudz. And this is where mainstream media and kind of myth and legend kind of get in the way. Because mainstream media would have you believe that every black boy out there is carrying a knife, is involved in some criminal activity. And that's not actually the case. And the police's own figures speak to that. So in terms of stop and search, it's not the most effective tool that they have in their bag of measuring tools, but it's the one they like to go to. And for me as a community leader, I mean, I can't answer for why they go to it. Something that's not effective is not proving the outcomes that you wish it to, then why do you keep on reaching for it? There's a certain smack of that, of antagonizing a community who historically have always, it's always felt challenged, and there's barriers in stop and search. But hey ho, I'm not, I haven't reached that level of political activism yet. But definitely, if that's going to be the case and that's their chosen tool, we as a community need to be informed and educated as to what it is and how we can empower our children with it.
Thank you. What would you say about dress code, stance, verbal communication, which you already touched on, and how to avoid being arrested in those circumstances?
Well, I wish I could. I wish I had the ability to say what you should do to not be arrested. Unfortunately, that is not within my gift. In terms of stance, I always like to see a young man or young woman stand tall. Uncover their heads. If they've got a cap on or they've got a hood on, take it off. And I know, you see, a lot of the way that our young people dress says a lot about their self-esteem and how they feel inside, how they feel about themselves, that they wish almost to be hidden or nobody to see them, or that they just look like every other young person. And for me,
could it be fashion?
I think hoodies were a fashion, but I think, we've all seen the meme, haven't we? Man's not hot. It's big busting sunshine outside, and here he is with his parker up with the hood, and the policeman saying, I'm sorry to stop you, mate, but do you know what I mean? And we laugh at it. It goes around on social media and we all press like because it's funny. But in actuality, and you kind of unpack that and pick that apart, what is that young man saying? If it's big busting sunshine, I mean, we've had some serious heat lately, and I've seen them, how does that young person feel about themselves, that they put themselves through that? And I think as adults, we kind of have to not look at that rather than the fact that it's fashion. In terms of stance, I said, I think it's teaching our young people to stand tall, to stand with their shoulders back. Proud. They are young men, they are young women, not aggressively, but to kind of like own their space. I am who I am. But again, that comes back to self-esteem. And self-esteem goes back to one of my earlier original points, is taught. It's learnt.
Of course.
And if you don't see that, and if you're not taught how to have positive self-esteem, then you will just pick up the snippets that you can, where you can, from teachers, from your friends, from whoever, from social media. Whereas it should be something that as parents, we are teaching in our homes, either by example or directly. How many of us, and what kind of role models, period, do we have in our homes, in our safe spaces? What kind of mindsets influence our home environments? And, you know, those are the things that we talk about at ANOS. I mean, I'm in no way preaching.
No.
But these are things that we have to look at. We have to look at the kind of influences. If we have every kind of roadman, friend, uncle in our homes, then that's going to influence the mindset of our homes. If we have, you know, it's for each person to call it as they see it. For me, I like to have strong, ambitious, very sort of open-minded minds within my home. I'm very opinionated. I've raised successfully 3 very opinionated children, but I don't want them to think just like me, because I suffer from cultural toxicity. So I like to have other people from other ways of life in my home, so they can learn from it. So they have a broader experience. So for me, it's about teaching that to our children to improve their self-esteem. So to me, that makes any sense,
And also to be able to communicate with people outside of their normal peer group. Because, you know, the world is made up of different cultures at the end of the day, and jobs, and, you know, you're required to be able to pronounce your words properly. It's not always about swag and all of those sorts of things, and knowing when to apply it. There's nothing wrong with being like cool and, you know, all the things that they look for when you're young, but you need to know when to switch that off. So having exposure with different cultures, I think, is a really important point.
I think that's a really good point to make, actually. Yeah, definitely. Having that ability
to switch
it on and switch it off where necessary. Definitely,
Donna, I was really happy to hear you say that there was a point, particularly at this time of the year, that you wanted parents to be aware of the fact that there's a rise in school exclusions. Okay. I'd like you to just tell your listeners how you would recognise if it's likely to happen to your child, and also how to challenge the authorities if it does happen, if you feel that it's unjust, and also what parents are entitled to have access to in terms of any files that are held on their children.
Okay, so this came about, I think you're referring to my oldest son, who's 15, was excluded for one day because he made one of his female teachers cry. And his vice principal, in the meeting that I was asked to attend along with my son, described my son as a leader of a posse, his words, a leader of a cohort, his words, and he's like a dog with a bone, was one of the references he made to my son. You know, you don't give up, you just keep going on and on and on. And I honestly thought that was what was meant to happen at school, because that's how children learn. But obviously not in this case. And what happened was he was excluded for the day. Now, when I went to the school, Claudz, I went, as I do, go everywhere. And the very next day, they wanted to put him into seclusion. And I said, not my baby. So I said, what I will do is, I'm educated to degree level. If that's necessary, he will do the work at home for the one day, and then he'll go straight into, it was the school holidays. The vice principal said that was fine. When I then went to collect the work the next day, the vice principal had done some homework and had found out who I am, if I'm anybody coming, a nobody, and what I do. And the complexion of the exclusion changed 360 degrees.
Oh, wow.
Now he wanted to placate me. I didn't know who you were, Miss Murray-Turner. You should have said when we spoke yesterday. Obviously, you know, we wish Omar the best. And he went on and on and on. And I said to him, sir, this is exactly why people like you in positions like you are so chafing to people like me, because it should matter not
Absolutely.
who I am what I do, who I know. But the head said that he was at a mayor's dinner, a mayor's tea party with you just last week and you're on the same table. And for me, when I came home, I felt so sickened that I went to video and I went on my Facebook page and I did I think it was a 40-50 minute and I shared it. And what I couldn't believe within 9 days, it had nearly 7,000 views. Absolutely. And that's when I realised that what I spoke about resonated with so many parents, people. My inbox became full of parents saying, sis, oh God, if you ever know what happened to me. People rang me, and I just realised that there was so much of this out there where parents have an inability to advocate for themselves. So I went away to my team. And on the ANOS team, I'm the face of it and the voice of it. But there are 8 of us with different professional input. Right. Mm-hmm. So we have a family recovery officer. We have somebody who's been chair of governors for years. We have a project manager, and also a lot of those individuals are also involved in other grassroots organisations within the community. What we decided to do was, we thought it would be beneficial to kind of use that outpouring from parents and devise a training plan, which we have. Flyers, the date of the event is on the 23rd of August, but flyers will go out, and I'll give my contact details in a minute. But what we've done is we've devised like a 3-part training thing for parents to just identify the low level kind of advocacy. So for parents who've got young boys in year 9, this is something I said in my video, so I'll say it again. I noticed Omar, he was like 5'5", but in that 6 weeks, he went from 5'5" to 5'10". So when he turned up for school at year 10, they now have a young man. When he left year 9, you released a young boy. Yeah. You've got a young man, the shoulders are broader, the voice got beer punted, and he's grown. I can see it in his physicality. Yeah. And so for a lot of us parents, it's that transition for a lot of white female teachers, for a lot of teachers, they find that intimidating because last year this was a child, and this year they have a man. Yeah. And not everybody is equipped to deal with that shift, with that paradigm shift. Yeah. They think they are, and they sign up to be teachers, but they're not. And of course, with young men being young men, they start to enter into the realms of things that women might find uncomfortable from a younger man. So we had an occasion where Omar, one of Omar's friends, commented on the teacher's blouse. That then escalated to, the boys being accused of sexual assault. But my point is that I'm trying to make is that this transition that we see as parents, my baby's getting big, to a teaching professional, it's not assumed in the same way. They now to see it as a threat. Right. I heard my son in this same exclusion meeting. Now my son is 5'10". I'm 5'9". Omar's a little bit. He's nearly 5'11", taller than me. But this teacher described my son to me in my presence as 6 foot and beyond. He said, "Come on, Omar. What with your hair? Come on. Miss is only little." And we went straight back to those very basic stereotypes. Yes. She was the little poor white teacher who he'd made cry, and he was this big strong black boy who should know better and should be protective to and I just sat there, and in the end I did say to him, "Sir, you would have made a brilliant police officer in the 70s and 80s. The way you just rewrote history in front of me, this wasn't something that was done behind my back or in my absence. In front of me, you have rewritten my son into this big colossus." And then he complained about his gesticulation. And I just realized there's so much of not just a cultural disconnect in terms of race, but also in terms of understanding youth culture for a lot of these teaching professionals. And parents need to be aware of this. We as a community, I'm gesticulating now, I don't know if they can see it. We're very handsy. That's how we are. Right. Our intonation in our voices, if they don't come from a background or a culture that understands that, and that's got nothing to do with race. We've got lots of people from different backgrounds who've lived in this melting pot called London that understand certain things. But if you're coming from outside of that, then this can have a direct bearing on how teachers perceive your child. Now, your child can be intelligent, but if they're gesticulative and loud and perhaps quite demanding, they may not have the emotional maturity as a teaching professional to say, "Hold on a minute, Jimmy. There's 30 of you in here. Yes. I'm coming to you. Yes. Could you just wait?" Yes. Or even, "Jimmy, your you're quite responsible. Can I ask you to just wait a minute, knowing that the others will wait once you've silenced Jimmy, and then they can carry on with their teaching. You have to have the emotional maturity to know how to guide a class. Now, I've taught in a PRU as part of my university placement.
The pupil referral unit. Yes.
And that's when the children who are chucked out of mainstream school go into these provisions. But you have to be able to guide. You have to assume that. You can't have these children running right over you. You have to assume the position of responsibility, the position of firmness, and sometimes you have to shut down arguments. Yes, I've been in a classroom when they want to tell me about, Miss, your ass here, your ass is banging. You're right, it is, and my boyfriend likes it, but I'm here to teach and you're the student. You just kill it dead.
Yeah,
you don't, feel nervous, and then they think that you kill it in its source. And you don't do it in a way that puts them down. They're young men. These are the things that they're looking at. But you handle it in a way that they know you still retain the power as the adult and the professional in the room, and that they are but the student. But when you don't have that, this is how sometimes children can get caught up in these needless exclusions. And if you're not aware of your child's school policy, that's one thing I would really advocate for all of the listeners to do. If you're a parent and you have children in the British schooling system, you make sure that you read your children's school policy like you want to know where next week's boat dance is. You want to know if Chairman's playing, you want to know if Fifth Avenue are playing, you want to know if DMAC is on there. You're going to find out. Read your school's policy like that.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to make it your business to know what's behaviour policy. You need to know. You need to know what the exclusions policy is. And make sure you're at parents' evening. Be that engaged parent. When they send a letter home, don't answer. Email them. Any conversations you have, you follow that with an email.
Why would you say that, Donna? I know why, but could you just let the...
Well, you see, when it gets to the stage where there's exclusions, there needs to be an audit trail. Now, you're the headmistress and I'm the parent. You may speak to me, you may see me in the playground. Oh, Miss Murray-Turner. When it comes to a sanction, say, and I'm going to want to argue against it, all we have is your word versus mine.
That's right.
Now, you're the teaching professional. You're a headmistress. You're a head of year. You're a vice principal. I'm just mum.
Yes.
In the workings of that process, it is more than likely that your word will carry more value and more weight than mine, because I'm just mum.
That's
and
right.
what is more, I'm mum who's produced this miscreant child who is a nuisance, who doesn't learn and who is disruptive.
Yes.
So the likelihood of the weight, there's no weight. There's no way this situation is going to favour me. But if there is an audit trail, if when they're going to want to say, well, does Miss Murray-Turner engage? Yes. There's an email on the 27th. There's one on the 1st. When you keep up that level of engagement and intersectionality with your children's faculty, it adds to the feeling that A, you're an engaged parent, and B, that you know what you're talking about. And this is why we wanted to structure the training, because we wanted to show parents, just by knowing their child's school policy, what to expect, what to look out for.
Right.
So the level of detentions.
Right.
If Jimmy goes from, and especially year 9 to 10, if Jimmy goes from maybe 1 detention a term to suddenly in year 10, there's 3 a week. Right. Sister girl, you need to be on that. What's going on? Make an arrangement to meet whichever, especially if it's every week geography. Right. You need to meet with the geography teacher. Right.
Are they building a case against this child?
That is quite a possibility. But what you need to do as an early intervention is to find out why, and to appear, hi, I'm Jimmy's mum. What's going on? I've noticed he's had 3 detentions for the month. Is there something? Right. You need to get in there before they do. Because one of the things that they always complain about is that parents are not engaged. They will send letters home, they will email, and we don't engage. Yes. And I always advise parents, get in there, email. If you can't email, you must have one friend who can email for you. Most phones now have the capacity. That's right. Use it. We're not picking them going to bed at night. You sit up and you send the one email, but you deal with the matter, because not dealing with it is not going to save your child. And I think that's a very important point to make in terms of exclusions. Understand what the pattern looks like. meet your child's teachers where you can. Go to open days at the school.
Yeah.
This is all about investment in your children.
Yes.
And it takes time and it's not easy. But at the end of the day, very few exclusions happen to children whose parents are engaged. Very few. You tend to find that it's the parents who are not engaged, who don't really have much to do with the school, that they will always push for exclusion. But you see, when you're engaged and you can work, it's a bit like having the bailiffs around. You make a proposal to pay it off. When you're engaged and you're making proposals of working with them, they like that.
Yeah. Is there any truth in, for example, if you have a school and they have their stats, and so they have their targets in terms of, you know, how many people are going to put through and how many people within that are going to pass. So they have these league tables. And so, you know, if we're looking for schools for our children, we would be looking at consistently a school performing at a certain benchmark over a 3-year period. So is it that they need to take out those disruptive children in order that they can get on with their job? And so that if, for example, there is no support mechanism and they can see that it's easier for them to sort of, move these people out of the way in order that they can focus on the people that are there to learn, and so they can get on with the job in hand. Because I know, coming from an educational background, that everything is based upon targets.
That's right.
Okay. And Ofsted and all of that make that more sort of pertinent. Now, with regards to my experience in teaching, I would have to say, obviously, I'm teaching in a college, so I'm dealing with adults, so I had it a little bit easier. But I've also worked in a school, and I know that obviously the parents, the teachers' ultimate goal would be to have 100% of the students go through, 100% of the students, responding in a respectful way in order that they can teach and that the students can learn. But if there is, as you say, somebody who's misbehaving and it's consistent and they're going down that path, they will see them through the door because they need to get on with the job in hand. So it's about the parents, like what you're saying, if I'm right, recognising, being engaged, speaking to the child, knowing where the child is so that they know that, because if they're working, they may not even know that that child has done a detention and that they're doing them 3 times a week. Because if they're getting home at 6, that child finishes at 3:30, they may not have that communication level with that child to know that that child's actually even going down that path. So maybe engaging a little bit more after school, what they're doing and what have you. Do you think? Because if a child is going down that route, are these not the same children who are likely to be going down the wrong path after school, i.e. unemployed?
Yeah. I would definitely say, in terms of what a lot of adults need to understand is, and this is not, I know this is not about politics, but I'm just going to say this. The capitalist model applies to every area of our lives. That includes education, that includes our healthcare system. And as we're talking about education, so academies are businesses.
Right.
And you're quite right. The children who identify with low-level disruptive behaviour, the ones who have behavioural problems, mental health, perhaps care plans, all of that stuff. If that doesn't fit in line smoothly with the school objective of getting a great Ofsted marking or whatever, then they will seek to remove those young people, because like any other business model, you are messing with my cash flow. With good Ofsted markings, gets an increase of children bring pupil premium for schools. All of that feeds into the great big mechanism of the education system in this country.
Yes.
So yes, you're right. If Jimmy is disruptive and nobody is coming forward from the family to advocate or to say what's going on, then yeah, they will look to remove Jimmy come year 10. And the problem here is, and this is what not a lot of parents realise, in year 10, Jimmy would have picked his options. And more than likely, he would have picked 8 or 9. Okay?
Yes.
That includes the ones that are compulsory, like English, maths and science.
Yes.
When you get excluded and you end up in a PRU, at best, you are doing 3 or 4. I've known some young men to be doing 2, like English and science. So in terms of enabling Jimmy for his life outside of school, it's almost as if our inability to advocate for our young people is part of the genocide of our young people, if that makes any sense. It goes hand in hand. If you don't engage with the school and you don't say what's going on, it could be that maybe Jimmy has not even a learning a behavioural matter that needs further investigation.
It could be he's not being stretched, do you find?
100%.
How
many of us go to our GP to start that process? How many of us, it's just the way it is? No, we can almost be hindering our own children by not investigating what it is. If there is anything, if there's nothing, I knew that my 2 boys are both born severely premature, one at 28 weeks and one at 30 weeks. So I knew with that there were going to be things about them that were going to fail. One has really poor eyesight. He's not going to like me saying this. And the other one is a functioning dyspraxic. But with that in mind and knowing that, I had to go to my GP. I had to work with the school so that I can get a CAMS referral, so that when my 11-year-old goes to secondary school, he has a statement that says, this child has this differential learning need because of whatever. If we don't do that, and I know that CAMS appointments are very hard and far between to get, but if we don't make the effort to show in primary school, we're almost complicit in the failing of our young people, because we're not using what is out there to try and help them with their differential learning needs. Some of the brightest children I know don't learn in no classroom setting, but you take them outside or you get them involved in something that kind of lights a fire in them, especially the creatives, my God, they will just so much flourish. So for me, it's about parents knowing and understanding their children and also being invested in the process. It's long, it's inconvenient. There are many times I want to be in my bed, but it's about being part of that process. Look at the trends, look at the detentions, look at the schoolwork. You know, if there is a need for a tutor, now I know everybody's going to say, well, I mean, I have no money for tutor, Donna. But if you have a friend or a colleague that can give you an hour, do you know what that hour every week can do to that child's attainment inside the classroom? Do you understand? It's not about having lots of money. Sometimes it's about thinking outside of the box. If you have a friend who did a degree in computing, or you have a friend who has, you know, written a book in terms of English, just an hour with your child. You might not have to pay them. You might trade them a meal. Come round and teach Jimmy and me cook for you. Think like we used to. It's not all about the exchange of money.
But there's also so many books in W.H. Smith's, and there's online support packages, and I mean, you've got the BBC website which can help prepare young kids for exams. You can do mock exams online and things like that. So it's about anything you put in a search on Google will just come up, won't it? So it's really about, like you said, investing in your children. And it's not about the latest trainers. I mean, and it's not a visual thing. They're not accessories. It's about the inner. It's about the knowledge. It's about those things. And that's what I get from you. And that's what I get, that you're trying to get parents to sort of look at children as, well, invest in the children, because if a young level they are failed, and it's not intentional, it may be a lack of knowledge, hence the training that you're trying to put on, which I'm going to get some details from you in a moment. Where there is no textbook on parenting, and when such and such happens, you turn to page 39 and the answers are all there. Not only are all children different, each circumstance is different, and you're just dealt with that day's load of issues, and you don't always have all the right answers. But where ANOS is bringing different women from different backgrounds, different experiences, different ages, different cultures, that those things can be raised there. So it would be worth, again, we will put at the bottom of the video exactly how to engage in that. You're based in Croydon. We're also trying to have a series of these videos in order that whatever you find is a current issue or current bit of information that needs to be shared, and indeed if there's any training or anything like that that's happening, that we need to hear it from first hand, basically, because you're getting it first hand. And so you can share it in a timely way, i.e. stop and search, very fresh. I don't even think Boris's seat's hot in Parliament yet, and you're passing that information on in a timely way. Donna, can you please let us know, just in a nutshell, the date, the time, the place of the training, what the training's called, and what parents will get out of it?
Okay, so the training will take place on Friday the 23rd of August at 7:30. It will be 3 hours of training from 7:30 until 10:30. It's not just ANOS, it's also in association with QK Consultancy, which is a training and development organisation. And what we'll be delivering is first, and I want to say this because I'm like this, we'll be having a conversation with parents, and we'll be having a conversation with parents where we start to look at a very deep root cause, what our experience of education is. Because believe it or not, and some people, there's no point sending Jimmy to school and expecting him to do well, but being flabbergasted when he doesn't. If your own experience of school and the way you talk about your education within the home is negative, we transfer this onto our children. So we want to kind of talk to parents about what their own experiences of school were. And we found at sort of like a proof of concept level, by just speaking to a few parents, that those parents who then have children who have issues at school, whether it's behavioural, whether it's attitude, are normally the parents that exhibited that themselves at school. So it's like everything else in terms of our experience. If that's been your experience, you pass that on, you transfer that to your children inadvertently. They pick up on the fact, well, you didn't like school, or you didn't think schools. So unless we can start to value education and show that to our children and help them negate the barriers within that system. So that's the first part of our training. So on the 23rd, it's not for the faint of heart. It will be looking at it that deeply. What was your experience of education? What have you transferred onto your children? When we talk about low-level behaviour, and the teacher says, Jimmy, can you put down your pen? If at home, Jimmy's doing something, if you don't teach Jimmy from he was little that particular behaviour might not be acceptable in certain forums, Jimmy, can you just sit for 5? If we don't teach our children, then we can hardly expect them to go into a room full of strangers and 1 or 2 adults be able to control that. We also, in terms of investment, we also are responsible, not all the time, but for a greater part of the time, for how our children feel about school and how they behave in school. Do you understand? And we've decided that's going to be the thing we're going to knock out the park first, because what we don't want is parents then who are like, well, we're not here to be passionate, we're here to be constructive with our passion. So it's not just about costing schools and Babylon system and they don't treat our Picnic right and exclusions. That's all true. But what are we doing at a much more intrinsic level to enable our children? And we'll be looking at that first. That's the 23rd of August, 7:30 till 10:30 at the Selhurst Railway Club, which is in South Norwood, actually Selhurst, SE25 6 November Sierra. It's on the 23rd of August. Come down. We are going to be putting tickets out on Just Tickets, so look out for that. But if you follow Another Night of Sisterhood on any of our Insta, Twitter or Facebook, so it's ANOSISTER Hood and our Sisterhood. On any of those handles, you will find us. Get in touch with us, via any one of us. Send us an email on our Facebook page. We will respond. We will be putting out an e-flyer this week, hopefully. And we want as much parents. Don't worry, I haven't forgot about all the parents I've inboxed me previously. But we want this to be big. This is about the community. Listen, I want to say something very real. Them that have no money, they are not going to make a program to support parents. We're going to have to go back to what we know best, and that's grassroots. We are going to have to support ourselves. So those of us, like Claudz, like myself, who are in a position to help instruct and to construct, we're the ones who are going to give back to our community to enable us to go forward. Yeah? And we want to do this in August so that come September, anything that's low-lying, parents can advocate for themselves. They would have looked at their child's policy. They would have read up on behaviour and exclusions, and they can begin to articulate for themselves. In the background, with people like myself, like so many others, who perhaps can articulate and advocate at a higher level, but we want to empower parents. That's true leadership, empowering people to help themselves. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you for that passion and that detailed sort of explanation of what people can expect if they go along to the training. So you heard it right here, 23rd of August, 7:30 to 10:30, and it's ANOS Sisterhood.
Yes.
Yeah, and Donna's name is Donna Murray-Turner, in case you wanted to follow her on social media, because that's another place where you can get the concrete information. Yeah. We can call this interview phase 1, if you like. Watch out for phase 2 coming soon. Phase 2 will be much more to do with the I can never say that word, statistics in relation to knife crime. And what it is that Donna has done specifically in the Borough of Croydon to bring about positive change. And hopefully you will join us in trying to support Donna through that process in order that that can be rolled out into other boroughs. Okay, Donna, it's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for your time,
sis. Honestly, Mum.
your
Thank
knowledge, and your passion. And all I can say is iLive is behind you. And
grateful for that.
Jason Henry, Jardina Morris, myself, we are all behind you and what you're doing. And at the end of the day, the aim is the children. We have sons, we have nephews, we have godchildren, we have friends' children, and nobody knows who's next.
No.
But they all have potential.
That's right.
So people like Stephen Oram are doing things like showing Proud and Gifted. You've got Stefan Brown doing Stop Our Kids Being Killed on the Street. We have Mark Prince with the Kyan Prince Trust. We have Courtney Brown. We have that lady's name. Phoenix, Cheryl Phoenix,
yeah,
there's so many
the Black Child Agenda
that are doing so many things, and I know that you're aware of all of them. But I just wanted to bring you to the, if you like, the table, okay? Because I believe that we need to look at things that are measurable, and things that have been proven to be effective. I think there's pockets of good things happening, but at strategic level. At level with people who advise Sadiq Khan, with the interest from LBC, the BBC and what have you, clearly you've got something to say that needs to be heard. And so we are listening. Okay, so thank you to all of you who have joined us. Hope you stay abreast of when we go on to phase 2. And if you feel that you will benefit from the information and the training that Donna has just shared with you, then make it a business to get in touch and to book your place. Okay, it's been your girl Claudz, aka Miss Ouch, right here on on iLive Radio. You can find me every Saturday between the hours of 6 and 8. I deliver independent music, and periodically I interview independent artists. But as I said at the beginning, it's difficult to continue to do that without actually looking at some of the issues that affect our community. So this is why I'm here today. It's been a pleasure to have your company. Goodbye.